But onto real news, and that is corona. Coronavirus is all we can talk about. It's all we can think about. It's like some alternate universe. Like, it really is. It's some like dystopian fucking movie shit right here. And I just want to know one thing. Why is COVID-19 not running rampant in the developing world? I mean, knock on wood, thank the good Lord, shout out Jah, shout out Allah, shout out whoever it is you believe in. Because if corona was to take hold like it has in the US and Europe, we would be fucked in the developing world. But thankfully, that has not been the case to date. And everyone keeps talking about the quiet before the storm, and it's coming, and we've been prepping, and we've been locked down. Social distancing just isn't possible in poor parts of the world. If you are living in what we call townships or informal settlements, otherwise known as ghettos or slums, when you have whole families living in one corrugated iron shack, it is impossible to social distance. You have to leave your house to get water. You have to leave your house to go to the bathroom. It is impossible to completely social distance from your neighbors when you have to share a toilet with them. But despite all that, corona has not ravaged these poor parts of the world quite like it has the US and Europe, and we've got to be asking ourselves why. I'm sure the lockdown has restricted the spread to a degree, but that is all very relative. Now, there's a couple of possible reasons, the most obvious of which being average age. In South Africa and India, the average age is 27, while in Italy it's 45. So based on age, we have a much smaller percentage of our population that is vulnerable, although we also have a concerningly high number of people that are HIV positive and infected with TB, which would make them more vulnerable. And then of course there's the climate. Apparently in the warmer weather places, it doesn't transmit as quickly or as easily, and that's all about to change. We're dearly hoping in the southern hemisphere that as winter gets ushered in, we don't have a huge spike in corona-related illnesses. Now this brings us to the wild card. It's a TB vaccination that most of us in the developing world would have got as a baby, and there is undeniable correlation between universal BCG policy and the reduced morbidity and mortality of coronavirus, and that basically means it just isn't making people as sick in those parts of the world, and that's exactly what it does with TB. Now BCG doesn't stop you from getting TB, it just reduces the severity of cases, and that's what we're seeing in corona in the developing world. People are getting corona, but it's not making them as sick, and it's not killing as many people. I'm not saying that you are immune, because you are definitely not immune. We can all catch corona. It will still be a huge risk for those that are most vulnerable, but evidence is mounting that in these parts of the world where we have TB vaccines, that actually we might not be as badly impacted, and that is a reason to hold hope. Despite what a lot of people believe, corona is not a death sentence. It'll be months before we get any conclusive studies back, but hopefully if you get it, it won't make you that sick. So what am I saying? Is it safe to end the lockdown already? For the sake of bringing an end to the starvation crisis that has been created, we have to end the lockdown.
Though the coronavirus pandemic was relatively slow to hit many developing countries, the World Food Program warns the outbreak could cause widespread famines of biblical proportions.
This is what hunger looks like when it spills over into the streets. A food stampede in Kenya's largest slum, leaving scores injured and 2 dead. A mile-long line for food in India, where workers wait in the hot sun. Protests in Lebanon as food prices surge uncontrollably. Even in the richest countries, the virus has left people hungry, but for the world's poor, it means starvation.
If the point of the lockdown is to ease the burden on the medical services, then they are ready. There is no arguing that the lockdown was necessary measures at the time. Kudos to Cyril Ramaphosa for acting swiftly. He did a lot better than a lot of other world leaders. But now we have to face the facts. There's been no significant rise in hospitalizations due to COVID-related cases. The government has repeatedly promised widespread testing. Instead, they are now boasting numbers of all the people they have screened. If a large number of confirmed cases are asymptomatic, then screening people is useless. For us to truly understand how far the virus has spread and its ability to spread in this region, we need widespread testing and not just screening. There is a huge difference. Screening is when they come and ask you a couple of questions. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Are you feeling sick? Check your temperature, no fever, on you go. But for people that are asymptomatic, then they just pass the test. They are COVID positive and they are continuing to spread it around. How can the government effectively fight this pandemic if they don't know what they're up against? What is the point of lockdown if you're not even trying to understand the scope of what we are dealing with? This is pointless. You're just condemning people to starvation for no fucking reason. Dr. Mkhize, where the tests at, yo? That being said, if they did actually start ramping up testing without symptoms, then I think we're going to see a huge spike in the confirmed cases, which shouldn't be reason for concern. If positive cases aren't resulting in hospitalization or death, then we actually haven't got that big a problem. And that is why we need to know how widespread the virus has got, how many people have been infected. And we will not know that without widespread testing, without people being symptomatic. So all the screening is good and well, and I understand why they are doing it, but we are past that point. Because if people aren't being hospitalized, then there is no reason for us to remain locked down. Right now, people are starving, people are hungry, and people need to be able to get out there and start putting food on the table because government has been incapable of doing so. Government has promised food parcels, and that just made it even worse. The government makes out like there's going to be food parcels magically dropping from the sky for everybody that needs them, but that is so far from the truth. There is all sorts of conditions. Most people won't even be eligible. Government provided food parcels are not going to reach the majority of people in need. They just do not have the capacity.
They saying that they had called a toll-free number and they were promised by the president that they would be given food parcels, and they now wanting to know where these food parcels are.
Government put out a number that people could call to request food parcels. That number has been at capacity since the announcement was made. They are apparently receiving 9,000 requests per hour. In Gauteng, a province that has over 10 million people, probably half of which are in dire need of those food parcels, are only delivering 2,000 food parcels per day. And most of those are to people that they were already delivering food parcels to before the pandemic hit. These are people that they were already supporting. They are struggling just to keep up with their normal capacity, let alone the spike in people in need of food because of this fucking lockdown.
South Africa, where a national lockdown has led to a sudden loss of work and hunger for millions. Food distribution is weighed down by cumbersome bureaucracy. If you're not on the day's list, there is no food.
These people are desperate. They are hungry and they are angry. Their biggest fear, if the virus doesn't get them, hunger will.
Mduduzi Kamalo has been waiting in line every day for 2 weeks now. His name is never called.
If you are hungry, it's easy to get sick.
He was working as a delivery man before the national lockdown dried up his income. His 4 young children used to receive 2 meals a day at their local school, which is now closed.
They know that if I don't get anything, for them, it's over.
In amongst all of this, people locked up and starving, governments making empty promises, supposed to be getting food to the people, but they're incapable of doing that. But you know what they do have time to do? They have time to go and knock down people's houses.
Structures like this one have been destroyed by the infamous Red Ants under the orders of the city of Johannesburg.
There is a lockdown. People are told to be staying at home. These people do not have homes. They have managed to scrape together the supplies to build themselves a structure that they can call home, that they can use as a shelter during this lockdown. And what's the government doing? Knocking them down. What the fuck is wrong with you? So there's been a moratorium on evictions during the lockdown, but government says that that does not apply to newly built structures that have been built during the time of the lockdown. But why? This is beyond counterproductive. You are telling people to stay home. They do not have a home other than the structure that they've just built. Why are you knocking it down?
We don't have a shelter. We don't have a house.
After newly built structures in Empolweni in the Western Cape got knocked down, they took it to court, and 130 people have won a court interdict against the government of the Western Cape, saying that they are allowed to rebuild their structures and that the government must supply the building materials that they destroyed and took away. Now, what the fuck was the point of that? Why not take it to court before you knock down their houses? People that do not have a home to live in are trying to seek shelter by any means possible. Why would you take that away from them? It makes no sense. This has been government's answer of what to do with the homeless and destitute and refugees and people that have nowhere to go. I mean, look at this. What the fuck is this? They are picking up homeless people off the streets and taking them to places like this.
I was asleep. The next thing I saw, we were forced out of our own space to come and sleep here. on the floor.
Refugees and asylum seekers who were removed from the Central Methodist Church say they've been brought to a site that is not compliant with the Disaster Management Act. More than 600 people are being housed under one roof.
You cannot put 600 people under one tent structure and call that social distancing. All you're doing is hiding people away. What the fucking fuck?